Hello, my fellow Ripplers. This is Chris Miles, your cash flow expert and anti-financial advisor. Welcome to our show that's for you, those of you that work so hard for your money, and you want your money to start working harder for you right now. You want that freedom and cash flow today, not 30 or 40 billion years from now, but right now, so you can live that life that you love with those that you love. But most importantly, guys, it's not just about getting rich. This is about living a rich life, because as you're blessed financially, you have a greater capacity to bless more lives around you. And I appreciate you guys tuning in, because that allows me to do so. Again, so excited to have many of you have reached out to us and said, hey, how can we serve you? That's great. If you always want to know about how to do that, go to moneyripples.com, reach out to us, contact us, and find out, what can we do? What can we do to serve you, whether it's through infinite banking or whether it's through creating more passive income in your life now.
Chris Miles was able to retire twice by the time he was 39 years old, but he's not content to just enjoy his own financial freedom and peace of mind. Chris wants you to have your own ripple effect so you can live free today. He's not the financial advisor you expected. He's the anti-financial advisor you deserve. He's jumping behind the mic right now, ready to make waves. Here's Chris Miles.
All right, guys. So I'm excited to do this interview because this is like a 1 year, like a 12-month, kind of like a before and after, right? Last year we had our, who was just about to retire, Colonel from California National Guard, Army National Guard out there, Dan Markert. We had interviewed him before when he was about really just barely hiring us, decided to share some of his experiences back then and where he was coming from, and just the things he had learned that got him to really find us. But now the cool thing is getting an update from Dan, where now he is retired. He is in a place where now he's work optional and doing what he loves. And that you'll see, he's got the coolest Zoom background. That's a live background. It's legit. I mean, we got people walking back and forth. He's on a new site there in Truckee. So Dan, welcome back to our show.
I appreciate that, Chris. It's a pleasure and an honor to help share a story to your audience. And for those who may not have known, so I did 34 years in the Army, 30 years as an officer. I retired as an infantry colonel in the California National Guard last year. And as I approached that retirement point, through friends and some of my own thoughts and research, I was like, hey, am I really ready to retire? And the answer was no, because when I looked at like, hey, I've been pretty traditional, low cost mutual funds, index, big savers, came clear to me that was not enough, right? That wasn't going to be sufficient for, I have 4 boys putting them through college. So even though I was retired from the Army, I'm not ready to be retired yet because I got 3 kids in college this year. One just graduated, but and I got a 4th on the way. So I reached out to Chris because I kind of heard you, listen to your podcast, and I was like, hey, I think I need some help on that. And the journey has been substantial. And so what I would share with people and what I learned was that investing in your house and having a bunch of debt equity is actually, anti-financial advice. That's not a good advice. That you want to leverage. Our economy is less capitalism and more creditism. And so if you're not taking advantage of smart leverage, right, that you can cover your debt to, your debt service ratio, whatever they call it, you should be borrowing money at if it's a low interest rate, and if you can get it at something higher, which is, after a conversation with Craig and going through the cash flow optimizer worksheet, just the discipline of doing that, even though you might know it, having somebody to talk it through and building it out and seeing what the potential is for dramatically increasing your cash flow is significant, because you just need to run the numbers, right? I refinanced when the interest rates were at their lowest, took advantage and did a cash out refinance, and it was substantial, right? So to be able to then say, and then I put it into private equity, accredited investor investments. One was an ATM fund, where you get a cut of ATM transaction fees. Another one was with Lane Calco and the apartment syndication in Phoenix. And then the other stuff went into Eckerd Land and Acquisition mineral rights to oil and gas that pays monthly. I like that. And that grows as they add more wells. So I went from basically, we'll call it from in the, savings we had in a brokerage account, went from a couple $100 a month, but usually, right, those are quarterly distributions typically. So, just we'll say it was maybe $2,000 a year. I mean, now my passive income cash flow is over $13,000 a month. Now there's debt to go with that, right? So, the home equity line of credit that I threw on top of the cash out refinance, that's, there's another $2,000 a month. Plus I did the insurance back line of credit with Bankrate, like you had on your show, and to use the infinite banking concept there. And so whatever that is, say that's probably the minimum. It's probably $300-400 a month. So yeah, there's interest payments going out, 13,000, passive cash flow coming in. We'll say it's 3,000 in debt servicing because you want to pay down some of it and build up, that dry powder for the next thing. As you pay down the insurance back line of credit. It's kind of how I'm doing it. So yeah, big journey, big change, big transformation, and what I learned was that truly do want to have people that you trust that turn you on to people. I wouldn't have known about Eckerd Land and Acquisition if it weren't for being a member of or being a client of yours. I mean, and I probably wouldn't have been so quick to jump in with Lane and a real estate syndication if I hadn't seen the cross podcast references. Plus I had a friend that was invested with him already. So that if you've got a good tribe, you want to call it, of people that you can trust, it's wise to do that. And I was resistant to pay for it because I was like, you can figure out this. I'm a pretty smart guy. But I overcame that resistance from, there's a lot of advice out there on it, which is, sure, you can figure it out on your own, but how long will it take you? How many hard lessons will you have? And once you're dealing with 5 figures worth of investments, or 6, you really don't want to have your own hard knocks if you can learn them from someone else and, paying modest, coaching fee or mastermind fee or whatever different people call them, different things. It makes sense. And it's hard when you're getting started. But when you see the monthly checks start coming in, the ATM fund pays monthly. That's a big deal. Anyways,
Yeah.
That's my story. That's what I've learned over the last year.
Well, it's fantastic progress. I mean, like you said, going from a few hundred a month to about 11,000 a month net, even after the debt servicing and everything else, that's pretty fantastic. And the thing I want to do is at least give kudos to you because, we get clients here from time to time that they'll act, but they'll act very slowly to the point where they're getting the results, but it's going to take them years to get the results, not because they couldn't get it sooner, but because they're just too afraid to act. And the one thing definitely for you is, one, you had the faith to try it out, to at least say, okay, let's invest in this consulting fee to make sure this is going to work. Which for you, of course, you made that back, and now currently in about every month.
Yeah, like every
you
month.
make that back.
Every back pays for itself.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think what helped me do that, when I wanted to, I had a career of being a decisive person and making decisions with imperfect information. But the other thing that really helped, I had a good friend who started on this path maybe 6 to 8 months before I did. Maybe it was a year. He did some toe dipping with a friend, again, somebody he knew from the military, who was a real estate syndicator, and he got into that, and then he dove in, and that's how I got with a couple of things. The ATM fund was one of the referrals, and then Lane was a referral. So it does make it easier to be decisive if you've seen firsthand, like, hey, this guy's getting a check every month, man, and it's like clockwork, right? 120 days from the time you make your investment, the ATM's fund starts paying you out. It pays on the 21st of every month, and then same thing with Bankrate, man. As soon as it goes into pay status, here's your, the 5th of the month check. And then every 25th of the month, here's oil and gas revenues.
Yeah.
And it does help. And then, so, I mean, I hope that interviews like this that you do and that you share client testimonials or whatever help other people realize that, that you should take the plunge, man. And then sure, you can start small, but don't wait too long. It's one thing to start small, but be fast about it. It's another thing to, drag it out too long, because you're missing out on the kind of compounding effect, right? Because I mean, and it's hard to be patient. I'm all year in, and I'm like, so I mean, really, there's no annual compounding yet. That's like next year. And so in alternative investments, right? It might be, 4 months, 6 months, till you start seeing the cash flow. But that's the nature of that type of investments. You do a value add real estate deal, and you're not stabilizing the rent and realizing the increased rent revenue from the new construction or the new renovations you've done until they're done, and that takes time. I like to point out is that, like, it totally depends on where you're at, like what age and stage, right? I mean, I started this, and I wish I'd started it sooner, but if you're in the professional class, right, and you have, good W-2 job, and you're able to do good savings, if you're a homeowner with that equity, it's a different story. You can move much faster, right? If you have a big savings account, I also redeployed a lot of 401k and IRA money into self-directed. That was the other thing I did pretty quickly, because, and if you've been a big saver traditionally over, 30 years, those are big numbers, and that allows you to deploy capital pretty quickly. If you're younger, right? I mean, if you're in your 30s, it's a little different story, right? Your savings rates are a little bit lower. The amount of capital you've saved up is smaller. And so that might be tougher to, I mean, you're not going to replicate what I replicated in 12 months. It's different pieces for different people at the ages and stages that they're at. But the key thing is, to me, don't let debt equity stay in assets that you own, your home. But if you had rental properties, don't leave it there either. Look at that, redeploy it. Absolutely make use of, guaranteed whole life policy, max ROI, whole life policy to double dip on that. Definitely do not leave, especially in 401ks. They're awful. I mean, with IRAs, I mean, if you've done, I'm a fan of the, dividend stocks. There's a place for them in my portfolio. Because those things, if you get the right companies, they grow their payouts, so you have increasing cash flow. So they cash flow. So there's a place for those, especially in a Roth IRA account. But yeah, you don't want to leave too much. So 401ks are horrible because they're in just these big managed funds with a lot of fees. Get that stuff out of there. And those are kind of the three big takeaways that you could make a really big difference if you did those three things. No debt equity. Don't leave 5-figure numbers in your 6-figure numbers. It gets worse the larger the number is in a 401k, and do the guaranteed whole life, and then get into these alternative, get into the other investments that you can. If you can qualify as an accredited investor, you're leaving a lot on the table if you don't find the right syndications. And you'll hear it all on all kinds of other podcasts or video logs, or which is really, you want to invest in the operator. It doesn't really matter about the asset class so much, or the deal. What you want to find is who's a good operator, right? Who's trustworthy, who knows how to underwrite, who knows how to manage risk, who knows how to properly use leverage, who has a good network of other people that they work with to execute investments as general partners. And that's hard to do on your own. It's time consuming if you try to do it by yourself. There's already a universe of people out there who have their trusted groups of people that they work with. Money Ripples is no different than some of the other. And Chris, I'd put you in that category of like, you're a trustworthy source of investment operators.
I appreciate that, man. Really do. Well, I know we were talking about this just before we came on the air, and maybe I'll kind of like end with this for you is, I mean, I know you have a big passion for the ripple effect we're trying to create. And I'm sure it goes more personally deep for you, but why is it you're so passionate that others do like what you're doing? You know, why are you so passionate that people kind of break these chains and break free?
I don't know, maybe it sounds corny, but I mean, to me, it's the kind of American ideal of, the self-reliant, person, right? I mean, if you, the more people who are not like beholden to, certainly to consumer debt, and aren't beholden to a wage job, right? If you're in the ownership class, right? And America was founded by people who they didn't want to, they didn't want to be servants of other people. They wanted to be their own landlord. And they wanted to do their own thing. And they were entrepreneurs. They wanted to have their own farm, their own whatever, their own candle making or fishing, whatever it is. So to me, I like, it's a healthy society that has a large number of people who are wise stewards of the capital resources that they're at. I mean, they're human capital of their time, and passive income helps you have more time, right? That you become more, you have the option to have more control over your time if you so choose, and you then can be more of a contributor. I mean, so that's my passion has this kind of a bigger socio-political economic viewpoint of like, if you're an owner and if you're an investor, I mean, you have a stake in the rest of society, right? I think a lot of times, maybe investors get painted as, selfish people, or as like, oh, you're just greedy, you're out for yourself. And it's like, well, no, I'm trying to be independent, and have the ability to be generous, and then of course not be a burden on anyone else. In fact, be the opposite. I can be a benefactor and not a burden. There you go. Alliteration. Be a benefactor, don't be a burden.
Yeah, I love that. It's interesting. You spent so many years fighting for our freedom, for our country and everything else, and now here you are talking about people becoming free, becoming wise stewards, becoming, like you said, the founding fathers were fighting for ownership. They wanted that right of property, that right of freedom to determine their own destiny.
Right? The freedom to transact.
Yeah.
Right. The freedom to engage in the freedom to, as you would say, the freedom to bring value to others, right? The money follows the value, right? And it can be difficult. It is more challenging to provide value if the more in debt you are, or the more constrained you are by paycheck to paycheck. And your paychecks aren't going to grow with inflation. That's just, our economy is not built that way, right? We have fiat currency, and the economy is built entirely on credit. So you want to own assets that can allow you to get credit, as opposed to being the borrower all the time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I like that, because then many people say, don't try to, become beholden to the government. You're saying don't even become beholden to your own job, because that won't keep up inflation. You need something else to create that freedom.
Yeah. I mean, like it would be a challenge. And speaking of jobs, I'm gonna have to get back to mine, but I have chosen to have a job instead of just living off my investments, but trying to solve.
That allows you to compound your investments faster too.
Yeah, no, definitely. It allows for a bigger savings buffer, and then to stack things up.
Awesome. Well, Dan, really appreciate you joining us today. Amazing story and amazing results, obviously coming from an amazing man. It's just a reflection of who you are, and I agree with you. It's time is really our most valuable asset right now, and what are we going to do with our time? So again, appreciate you joining us today, and everybody else, I would just give the same advice, is that, here's the bad news. The bad news is this: results are your fault, good or bad. The good news is this: the results are your fault, good or bad. You have the choice. The question is, what will you do to get there? Will you continue to, it's great to listen to these podcasts, but at what point will you get this to take action to where it gets you results? And that's not just something you listen. You're not just a hearer of the word, but you're a doer as well. That's my challenge to each of you. If there's any way we can serve you, let us know. Go to moneyripples.com. But everybody, make it a wonderful and prosperous week. And we'll see you later.